Ooh. Ooh, it's nice in here. Actually, it's about 14 degrees. So I got all the forms off the tub, and today I gotta clear a bunch of little gaps and fill some holes and get this stuff ready for the membrane, which is gonna make this whole thing waterproof. So let's get the forms off, and I'll show you what we're doing today. I mean, this was pretty uneventful as far as removing forms goes, other than that it was really exciting to finally get all the wood off this thing. The rest of this video is basically going to be me cleaning up the concrete, patching holes, and then I cut and fit the flagstone that goes on top of here. So I hope that is enjoyable, because there's a lot of little things that had to go on between the last video and now. But that's what this is all about. So also I should mention that the forms on the inside I took off with one of those oscillating multi-tools, which I didn't think I would ever really have a use for, but turns out that that is the perfect thing to kind of remove the wood around those jet pipes. All right, so I got all the forms off, and we have a little bit of work to do to finish the concrete and get it ready for the tile and the membrane and stuff like that. Most of the pour went pretty well, but there's some holes and gaps that need to be taken care of, and then some areas that need to be ground down. So on the pad here, just around the rebar, I got to grind that down. I got to dig out this dirt that's fallen down and repair the drain that's here. It's going to go behind and fill this in with gravel. This is one of our sample retaining wall stones. There's going to be a retaining wall up here and down there. Inside the tub itself, I'm going to start by getting rid of these rough stub pipes, and I'm probably going to cut them back to about here, and then before tile we'll cut them back just so that they protrude to the finished face of the tile. And then, as you can see, I already started a little bit of the patch, but there's a couple voids where the vibrator didn't shake the concrete into the right place. So I have a mortar bag, and I'm going to squeeze in some concrete and then trowel that smooth. But then for the smaller holes, all these little tiny voids here, I'm just going to hit it with a putty knife and some polymer modified patch, concrete patch. And this is, the main reason I'm doing this is because the membrane does a lot better when it sits on a flat surface versus all these little tiny voids. So that shouldn't take too long. I also have to fill in the bolt holes. I don't think I showed those in the stop motion clip, but I basically just these were covered with tape, and I used the nuts to drive these out, and those go down to the little concrete standoffs. So once those are filled, that'll be completely sealed. And then things like this little ridge in the corner, and here, this little ridge here, this stuff will build up where we couldn't get the trowel during the pour. That's all gonna get ground off, and then I'm gonna make sure this is dead flat and everything is smooth in prep for the tile. All right, let's get to it. It was nice to get these pipes out of the way so I could have a little more working space and then start patching all these little tiny holes in here. Now, this is where I'm like, I should have sprayed some concrete slurry on the forms before I did the main concrete so that all these little tiny voids wouldn't have showed up, but it is what it is. This is why you don't leave your liquid stuff outside when it drops down to -6 degrees. The bottle says don't let it freeze. Well, it froze. But if it doesn't work as well as it normally would, it's not a huge deal. It's just filling some small cracks. We're gonna mix it with water anyway. I'm trying to get these holes patched, and I gotta thaw out my bonding adhesive. Ain't nobody got time for that. All right, I took that primer and mixed it with some of this patching cement, threw it in a mortar bag, and then squeezed it into these couple large voids. There must have been some lack of vibration when we were pouring the concrete. Not a huge problem once they're filled and ground down. You won't even know that they were there. Okay, first crack at the patching of the various little voids and holes. It looks like shit. But that's just because it's drying. And once this stage dries, I'll kind of clean everything up and vacuum up all the dust and look for any other small holes. I was just watching a video about the vapor barrier. No, I'm not vapor barrier. I was just watching a video about the membrane, and that will fill 1/8-inch voids. So the little tiny ones don't have to be concerned about. But you know, this is going to be one of those parts of the project where you do a little bit, and then you let things dry, and you see if there's any problems, and then you do a little bit more, and then slowly get this ready for membrane application. All right, now I'm going to take care of this ridiculous drain situation. This dirt kind of just sloughed off of the side of the hill a little bit with the water, and all I got to do is move the dirt, reconnect the drain, and start pulling buckets of gravel up here to start backfilling and prep for the retaining wall installation. I reinstalled the drain after digging out all this dirt. The drain was removed so I could get the concrete forms back in there, and I pulled up a full load of gravel to backfill above the drain, and sure looking forward to filling up the retaining wall with all these buckets of gravel. Next up, because there's not a whole lot I can do on this until this concrete dries here, but all this trash here, gonna chip it out, start cleaning this up. This is gonna be under the deck, so this doesn't need to be beautiful, but I won't be able to sleep at night if there's this left over. And then there's little bits and pieces on the top. This is gonna get covered with the mortar for the top surround stone, so all this needs to be is flat and level all around. Doesn't need to be perfect. There's some flash to remove over on this side. And once it's chipped out, I'll use the grinder to smooth any of the layers, but it probably won't need to do too much grinding on the deck part. I want to preserve my diamonds. Preserve my diamonds for the where the grinding is needed. Here I basically just use this hammer drill with a chisel to chip away all the concrete flash around the molds and sweep it away, and then did the same around the edges. The way the forms hit the bottom of the concrete made a little lip that I needed to chip away. I tarped the tub and put a little electric space heater inside. Let's see how warm it is. Not as warm as last night, but putting some heat in here and make these surfaces not freezing will be better for the mortar and patch to adhere. It's a little warm today, but when it gets really cold, it's just not good to apply all the various coatings that we're going to be putting on here. So I'll keep grinding on it. And most of the patches are cured hard now. And what I'm going to do today is start the grinding process. So I'm going to use some straight pieces of wood, some paint, sort of like a hand scraped way, machinist's attitude towards leveling concrete. So we're gonna find the high spots, grind them down, smooth out the patches where we need to, and then after that's all done, clean it up and apply any additional patch to areas that are low or holes that won't be filled by the membrane. Let's get to it. It's hard for me to describe how terrible it is to grind concrete without one of those vacuum attachments on your grinder, which I wish I had brought from my shop at home. But you know, I had to do this grinding, so you can see this massive dust cloud just everywhere. Good thing I had a dust mask, because I probably would be dead now if I had to breathe all this stuff in. So I basically just hit all the rough and high spots and removed any of the flashing and smoothed out everything. I ended up putting a leveler on the seats and the bottom, which you'll see in a little bit here. But this is really just like cleaning up anything that would make it really tricky to lay the tile, basically.
Well, this was a major bummer because I got in there and ground a lot of concrete and everything is covered in dust. But it's looking better now. So there's a couple voids to fill in with the acrylic filler. Polymer modified filler, whatever it's called. Hey, my goodness. And then I'm going to put some dams made out of expanding foam around the edges of the seats here. And put a self-leveling skim coat. So there's some slight undulations in the concrete. And the skim coat is a very thin cement mixture that will sort of find its own level when you spread it out. And that's going to seal some little voids, some little cracks that we had to deal with where the concrete wasn't perfectly clean. And when that is dry, it's going to make a really flat, nice bed for the tile to sit on. Okay, let's fill those holes. And patching round 2. So after grinding, there were lots of little voids, which I hit with more of this concrete patch. And I, of course, ended up doing this several times. But I was trying to get rid of as many large voids as possible so that there was a nice smooth surface for the membrane to attach to. Alright, we're getting prepped for the tile underlayment here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this expanding foam around these edges to make a little dam. That way I pour the underlayment on, it doesn't drip down and make a mess. I probably do one on the skimmer inlet too. It's pretty good, but I think it could level out a little bit. And then once the dam's built, you put down the primer and get that drying. Let's do it. Just want to quickly mention that I don't like expanding foam, and I hope I never have to use it again. I let the foam set up a little bit and then trimmed the edges so that there was a nice straight line where the corners were on the seats and stuff like that. And I cleaned everything up and then sponged everything down so that there was no dust, because I didn't want the primer to not adhere well. Here I'm putting the primer all over the areas that the concrete leveler is going to go on, and this is it's a special primer for concrete leveler, which I'm mixing up to the instructions because it needs to be just the right consistency or it won't flow. But if it's too wet, then it's not going to set up right. Basically pour it on, and then you kind of push it to the edges. You want to make sure that there's always like a wet edge. I was just losing my mind here, which is why the camera's going all over the place. I was using a torch to pop some of the bubbles that were coming to the surface. It worked out pretty well. I think I could have mixed it a little thinner given the temperature, but it's quite level at this point. And just removing all the expanding foam. It left a kind of a rough edge, but I'll grind that out. This is a beautiful Pennsylvania blue flagstone that we've been cutting into sections, angled here. It's hard to tell because everything's covered in snow because it blizzarded yesterday. But yeah, we got a couple more pieces that we got to cut into 14 by 20 rectangles, and then this smaller one is going to get cut into some custom pieces to fit around the skimmer. It's great stuff. I got a pretty sweet Hilti rental diamond saw, and I'm really looking forward to blasting a fine mist of water in negative freezing, below freezing temperatures. So let's have a blast.
These first couple shots are actually from the day before I was talking about the Flagstone, so the weather was a lot nicer and it was easier to cut all these. Saw worked really well. I just marked out the lines and then cut them square. But the cold day was rough because I had to keep heating up the saw with a torch so that it wouldn't freeze the water pipes. So then I was fitting all the stone around the skimmer. That required some custom cuts, which I lay out in a little bit. But first thing, I needed to build a little bit more support for the pieces that went around back. So I just quickly poured some concrete in these little makeshift forms to add a little more room for the flagstone to sit on around the skimmer area. For that front piece of stone, I just marked a rectangle on the front of it and then trimmed it to size with the angle grinder and a blade and just knocked out the corners. But the back pieces required a template to do it right because I wanted to get the spacing just right around the outside of the skimmer. So I made a cardboard template, fit it just right, and then took it to the stone outside and cut those two pieces to fit. All the flagstone was slightly different thicknesses, which this turned out to be somewhat of a pain in this whole process, and I probably should have hand-picked all the flagstone instead of just asked for a certain square footage of flagstone. But that's my own fault. So to help me lay the flagstone, I set up these building lines, which is those little wood things hold these strings across all the different facets. And then when I lay the stone down and make sure the top of the stone just grazes that string, it will be level and uniform all the way around. Alright, finally we've gotten to the laying of the flagstone. So I put down a primer all around the top of the tub, and I also primed the back of all the flagstone with this concrete primer. And then mixed up my mortar and just slowly worked my way around the tub, making sure each stone was set just right against that build line, and that everything was level and square. And it was a pretty straightforward process. I think the key was mixing only enough mortar to do a little bit so that I didn't feel rushed with the mortar setting up, because the consistency needed to be soupy enough that I could wiggle the stone down and it would stick, but hard enough that it wouldn't go below the line. It was a lot easier to add a bunch of mortar and then push it, squeeze it out than it was to add too little and then you'd have to pull the stone up and add a little more. It was great. I enjoyed getting this flagstone installed. It was one of the first things that marks the tub almost nearing completion, perhaps. Oh yeah, I am super stoked that this part is done. Got the flagstones installed and put the grout in and sponged them, and it's looking really fresh. Got a little skimmer situation going on here. This hot tub is starting to, begin to be looking like a finished hot tub. This is the surround. We'll probably seal these with some sort of sealer, obviously, so that it has this kind of darker, wet look. I think that'll look nice. Next I got to put the veneer stone on the front here and build this retaining wall before this hill collapses. And got to put the membrane in here, get ready for the tile. But yeah, this is awesome. Thanks for watching, everybody. Hi, if you liked this video, please let me know by clicking that thumbs up, and consider subscribing to the channel by clicking the red subscribe button. Please check the notes below the video for more ways to keep this channel going. Your support is greatly appreciated. And always, never stop building.